Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, yeah, I am Charles Cure and I sing in a band called Hush.
And Charles, how would you describe the music of Hush?
Hush is primarily a sludge metal band, but it has a lot of different influences from the world of metal and also post-rock and ambient music. So it's kind of a combination of like sludge and doom and post-metal and ambient, I guess I would say. This is like the question where you ask an artist to describe their own stuff and they have to give you like six paragraphs.
Well, the
Well, we
reason,
can't we can't really be pigeonholed.
well, the funny thing about that is the reason why I do it that way is because you'd be surprised how many death metal bands don't want to be described as death metal, or how many bands that you would think of automatically as black metal, don't, as you said, don't want to be pigeonholed. And so I
Sure.
ask the bands to describe their music, to give them a chance to explain how they see their music. But you'd be surprised how many bands get flustered by that question.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I bet. Well, because when you're making it, it seems like very obvious to you that there's a whole lot of stuff in it, right? Whereas the listener is kind of like, oh yeah, no, this is death metal or this is doom, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm curious, and we'll speak about this in more depth when we speak about this latest album. But would you say that the bass guitar has a particular importance in the music of Hush?
Yeah, we basically have two bass players. Jordan Kaza is credited on the records, I believe, as just playing eight strings, but he actually plays a huge eight-string bass that is specially that he uses like specialty strings on. So half of it is guitar strings, and I think some of it are bass strings. And then we have a traditional bass player who just plays a four-string bass down tuned.
Yeah, and we'll speak about how your two how Jordan and Jason implement that on this latest release. Before we get there,
Sure.
though, would you mind telling everyone what brought Hush together and what your intentions were when you guys first started?
Oh yeah, definitely. Jordan and our original drummer Ryan Strainer, they had been in a band together, and it was kind of like a proggy metal band actually, and they wanted to play slower, heavier music, and they knew me from a previous band I had been in locally, and asked me if I would come check out a practice once. So I did that, and they played me this song that eventually turned into a song called Antler Born that's on our Untitled 1 and Untitled 2 records. And Jordan played his really big bass thing, and I was hooked on that song. And I said, hey, if you guys will play that type of stuff, and Jordan, you will play that instrument and you'll play it slower, I'm in. And from there, I was friends with Jeff Andrews, our guitar player, from many other bands. And I asked him if he would be interested in playing guitar, and he got right on board. And then for like the first year of our band, I would say we actually had just the four of us. And then when we began to write music for our Unexist record that came out in 2014, we added a bass player because we realized that we needed a little bit of more kind of like mid-range sound in order to kind of fill out the music.
So the eight-string bass was present from the beginning, and you guys got into this with the intention of making slower music. Uh, did you also plan on making atmosphere a big part of your sound?
Yes, we have always had those kind of elements in the music. Our original drummer played a little bit of synth actually on our first. It's now not available online anymore, but our first demo EP that's called Untitled One. And we had always wanted to incorporate that kind of stuff because he had actually been in like a post rock band, and our current bass player Jay Tash had also been in that same band with him, and we are all big fans of that kind of music, like ambient music, cinematic, electronic music, and kind of like post rock and indie rock. And so we always wanted to incorporate actually like as much of it as there is on the current record, but we had some difficulty, I guess, bringing that together for our other records. Um, but it has always been an element that we have wanted to incorporate more heavily for certain.
Now, when you say you had difficulty incorporating it, was it logistical problems with not having enough band members to have one person uh, be dedicated entirely to the ambient parts, or were there other reasons?
No, it was mostly that. I think it was that initially we kind of thought, well, maybe we should have somebody who just plays synth. And for a while, we actually did play a few shows where I played some synth parts between songs. We had a Moog Taurus bass synth that I would play sometimes, but it was difficult for me to maintain the live energy singing and playing that. And we just really couldn't locally find somebody who I think was sort of on the same page with the kind of ambient stuff that we wanted to do. And then a further restriction was that up until the most recent record, we had never spent more than like 2.5 or 3 days in the studio to record a record. So we just really didn't have a lot of time to experiment with stuff like that in the studio and see how it would turn out.
And when you say locally, you guys are based in upstate New York, right?
Yeah, we're based in Hudson, New York, which is about 2 hours north of New York City.
Okay, cool. Um, I'd like to speak a little bit about the songwriting process for you guys. How do songs typically start for Hush?
Uh, Most of the time, Jordan brings the basic song structure to the table. He writes a bunch of riffs either on the piano or on his instrument, and sometimes even just guitar. And he will send us some files, and we'll kind of listen and see what we think. Then we'll get to a practice together and jam out on some different ideas. And usually the songs take a couple of months to develop, and when the music and instrumentation is finished, I start working on them usually. And my process is basically that I just listen to a song like hundreds of times and see what it makes me feel like, and then I proceed from there. So it's kind of like a combination of the remote work where we send a bunch of little riffs around to each other and see how everybody feels about it, and then the sort of traditional just get in a room together and figure it all out.
And if you had to estimate roughly, percentage wise, how complete are these songs from what Jordan originally sends you to the way we hear them when we hear the albums?
Oh man, usually when Jordan sends us something, it's very rudimentary, which is kind of how Hush writes music. I'm sure you can hear in the songs that the majority of the heavier parts of the songs are relatively straightforward in terms of their musical arrangement. There are some big bar chords and maybe like a lead or two, and Jordan really does establish the rhythmic and sort of heavy backbone of every song, and that's what we work off of when we initially start. Yeah.
And so the changes that come in once you guys are in the room working together, is that largely about pace or maybe dynamics and how to implement these heavier parts?
Yeah, it's usually when we're in the room together, we all learn these kind of like massive heavy riffs. And then what we start doing is kind of drawing them out a little bit and adding the atmospheric elements to it and kicking around ideas about mainly, like you said, the dynamics of the song. And also, especially for the new record, we really had a few discussions about the overall mood of the songs and the mood of the record. So we had like a very specific idea of what we wanted the kind of like emotive thrust of the record to feel like when the listener, got to it. And we would essentially kick out anything that really didn't fit within that scope.
So let's talk about this latest album. It's called
Sure.
The Pornography of Ruin, and it was released on the 24th of June of this year. Was it
Yeah.
also self-released?
Yeah, we self-released the digital and CD version, and like Sludge Lord Records from the UK is releasing it on cassette, and we are trying to figure out how we might want to arrange a vinyl release for it in the future, but we have no announcements to make as far as that goes yet.
Cool. And we could speak a little bit more about the physical releases later on. Uh,
Sure.
when did you start working on this album?
Quite a while ago. The first song that we wrote for this record is the second track called Above Your Head, They Close Like Giant Wings. And I believe we wrote that song toward the end of 2016. And we have been working on the record in some form or another ever since then.
And obviously, recent global events probably uh, caused this album to be delayed a little bit. Um,
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
let's start with the title, "The Pornography of Ruin." What is that referring to?
Well, part of the backdrop to the writing of the record is that in 2016, I was actually in a really bad car accident that was I was injured in extremely badly. The basically the whole right side of my body was broken, and I spent a month in the hospital, and then it was about 6 months before I could walk again or do any kind of real physical activity. So that was a very intense and kind of devastating process for me to go through and then recover from. And during that time, we also had kind of a series of just like personal issues within the band, not like tension between the members or anything, just everybody also had, some other life stuff going on. So for a short period of time, Jeff actually left the band, and Jason Tash, who plays bass for us now, moved to guitar. And we began the writing process that way. And then we had a couple of other lineup shifts, and then Jeff wound up coming back in early 2020, and that was when the record began to really come together in its more of its current form.
So before we move on with the conversation about the music, how is your health after recovering from that accident?
Oh, it's very good. I'm fully recovered from it. I still have a couple of very minor, like, sort of lingering issues, but I was very fortunate to make a full recovery, and I'm super thankful for that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Uh, as far as the music, we spoke about the band's writing process and how songs come together for you guys. Uh, knowing that Jordan handles the majority of the songwriting, um, would you say he went into this album with an intent to do things differently than from your previous albums?
I think so. I think that was actually kind of all of our intent, but especially I think Jordan has, I mean, not only has he progressed greatly as a songwriter over the time that we've been in this band, but I think his taste in music has kind of shifted a little bit away from heavier music and more into some kind of like ambient territory. And I know he likes to listen to a lot of like cinematic stuff, and I think that has affected the way that he arranges the songs specifically, and also it accounts for a lot of the sort of extremity of the dynamics on the record, I think.
Yeah, cinematic, I would say, is a good way to describe this album. It does very much feel like, even without knowing the backstory of the songs and the accident that you mentioned, there is a almost a conceptual feeling to the entire album that it feels like this is something that was supposed to be listened to as a whole. Like this is something that tells um, a complete story from beginning to end.
Yeah, yeah, that is what we were hoping to achieve with it. So I'm glad that that comes across, definitely.
And would you say that this cinematic feeling and the increased dynamics on this album are what separates it from your previous releases?
I think so, definitely. We've always had these kind of we've definitely always had some dynamic shifts within songs, and we've always tried to incorporate some melody and atmosphere into the heaviness of the tracks, which in the past could often be very oppressive, which was also a choice that we had consciously made. But I remember that when we first began discussing this record, when we were first writing the songs, the one thing that all of us agreed on was that the record overall should be cohesive, and that should also feel sad instead of just punishing. I think what we wanted was to take the sonic heaviness that we know we're capable of and infuse it with enough emotion to make people feel the heaviness on a separate level.
And we spoke a little bit about the role of the bass in Hush's music, but would you say that the bass is more prominent on this album than it was on previous albums?
Yeah, I think so, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we wrote a lot of these kinda, like, quieter, dreamier, melodic sections, and so the main difference is that you can hear the bass articulate itself a lot more clearly than in the past, where it was sort of part of usually, like, a large wall of kinda distortion. The fact that we do have 2 bass players and they both use kinda different sounds, sometimes even when I listen to a part, I'll listen to what I think is maybe a guitar and it might be something that Jason is playing, and that's always been really interesting to me, the way that the two basses play off of and with each other.
And it seems like on this album, the wall of sound and the guitar is used in a more sparing way, like more for
Yeah,
emphasis.
definitely. Oh, yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I also think just generally, there's a lot more space in this record. It feels like the songs kind of they breathe and sort of kind of bloom into existence instead of just, starting off by smashing you in the face and continuing with that the whole time through.
Now, when you guys had got together about 10 years ago, did you imagine that your music would go in this direction, this more cinematic direction?
I don't know that we had the specific idea that we would end up where we are right now, but I do think that we all wanted this to be kind of the way that we realized the sound that we were going for, because I think, uh, honestly, like a kind of sense of sadness or melancholy has always been a serious part of the underpinnings of the band and the songs that we write. And I think this time around we just happen to have enough time to kind of learn for ourselves the process of bringing that feeling into being more fully.
So I think anybody who has checked out the album will notice that the song titles are quite striking. Do you want to say where the song titles came from? The inspiration for those song titles?
Oh yeah, definitely. Every one of them is a quote from something. Um, and Basically, what I would do was, while I was in the process of writing these songs, I was kind of exposing myself to a lot of media that I thought would go along with what the concept was for each song. And In the course of sort of sifting through all of that stuff and creating a mood for myself to be inspired to write lyrics, I would the course of that, come across something that usually stuck in my mind, and it kind of created like a, almost like a starting point thematically in my mind, even if it's, something that maybe, the listener wouldn't necessarily directly relate to the mood of the song. So when one of those little phrases or moments from something would get stuck in my mind, I would pick it out and name the song after it. The best probably example of it is the first song on the record, that's called I Am Without Heaven and a Law Unto Myself, which is taken from a quote by Mao Zedong's wife, who's a woman named Jiang Qing, and she was the minister of propaganda for the Chinese Communist Party during the Communist Revolution. And she was a very interesting person. And she said that quote, or something very similar to it. It's an English translation, obviously. As she was being dragged out of a courtroom when she was put on trial for basically being a counter-revolutionary after Mao Zedong died. And I just found it to be an incredibly striking thing to say when you're, about to be imprisoned.
So basically, that was her like Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men moment, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You're out of order. I'm not out of order.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that was her personality. I mean, for a person who was, deeply involved in the communist revolution, she saw herself as a powerful individual, and really also recognized the power of an individual person to make a mark on their society and their culture.
And to clarify, these quotes tied into what you were already working on thematically, but the songs themselves are not necessarily about what the quotes are about, right?
No, yeah, it's just something in my mind that thematically relates to it. They're not like a direct reflection of what the song is about. The song I was just mentioning is about, sort of personal destruction and transformation. And what I thought was interesting about that quote and how it dovetailed with that theme is that it sort of meant to me that like a person could, even in the face of great difficulty or it literally total loss of freedom, still have some ability to determine who they were and make a statement of identity. And I really found that to be powerful, and that is also what the song is about at its core.
Let's talk about the recording of the album a little bit. Where did you
Yeah.
guys end up going for this?
We actually built a recording studio to make this record at Jordan's house, and it's called Howl Audio Environment, and it is now a fully functional recording studio. And there's been probably, I would say, 10 or 12 other bands who have recorded there since it's been completed, and since we recorded this record. So he just happened to he bought a house. Uh, right before the pandemic, and we had been thinking about where to go to record in a studio. And as I had said earlier, we had never felt like we really had enough time to try some additional stuff that we had wanted to on previous records. So we knew we needed about a week in the studio at a minimum to realize what we wanted to on this record. And when we hit 2020 and it became pretty clear that we weren't going to be able to go anywhere else to record, really, he just began renovating this barn on his property until we got to the point where it is now like a full-on studio.
So Howl Audio is Jordan's studio, but Jordan didn't engineer this album, right? He wasn't the recording engineer on this.
No, he was not. Our friend Ryan Slowey, who we have worked with on every single one of our records, he is a very close friend of all of us, and he used to be in a band called Maggot Brain that we played a lot of shows with. And he is an excellent audio engineer and really has a great ear for this kind of music, and he also knows all of us very well and knows exactly what we would like to hear from our band. So he spent a lot of time with us on this record, and he came up with a lot of great ideas for it, and I think he made it sound really fantastic.
And as you mentioned, Ryan has worked on all of your albums. Why has this partnership lasted as long as it has? What is it about it that makes it work?
It's I think really when it comes down to it, it's like he has been almost like an extension of our band. He's seen us live numerous times. He's played with us. He likes the same kind of music that all of us like, and he is really a great musician in his own right, And so it's very easy to communicate with him about what it is that we want a particular part in a song to sound like as an end result. And he's also been really like a great sport about recording us in all kinds of weird situations in the past. In When we recorded our previous record, Untitled 2, we actually recorded it in our guitar player Jeff's basement, and we had made all these like little areas where we sectioned off parts of the basement to use as isolation booths, and we actually had two drummers play live on that record. And it's like situations like that. He also recorded our first EP, Untitled 1, in an abandoned warehouse where we used to practice, and he brought all this gear out with him, and then we had to run like 100-foot long extension cord from another part of the building to bring power into this huge room that we were playing in. So when you have somebody like that who's just willing to go into all these kind of out of pocket spaces to help you get your sound, it's like you develop a serious working relationship.
And we spoke a little bit about how your songwriting has evolved on this latest album. Did you want on the mixing or the engineering side for your sound to evolve as well?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think we're always trying to keep our ear out for a way that we can kind of maximize the dynamic range and the heaviness of our songs, and I think we really did get very, very close to the sound that we've been looking for a long time on this record. But as you know, you can always do things differently, and potentially get a better outcome. And I think for the next set of songs that we write, we're progressing in a little bit of a different direction, and it'll be interesting to see how those play out and what the recording process for the next group of things will be like. It may require something different from us.
And in terms of the sound of the album, what would you say the difference is? What was the emphasis on this time around?
I think the most serious emphasis was on first of all making everything sound as clear and detailed as possible, but also making sure that because we have kind of such a wide range of sounds on the record and such huge dynamic shifts. What we really wanted was for very even transitions between loud and heavy parts, and for the quieter parts of the record to come through in the sort of dreamy, hazy way that they do, and for them to all be kind of clear and crisp sounding. And I think we definitely were able to achieve that. I mean, to me, it wound up sounding much better than I had originally even thought it could. So, yeah.
So Ryan engineered and mixed the album. Who did you end up going for to master the album?
Jack Shirley from Atomic Garden in Oakland, California, and we had chosen him because we all really like a lot of his other work. In particular, we thought that he had made the Amun Ra Mass 6 record and the Death Heaven Sunbather record sound really beautiful and really clear and crisp in a similar way. You know, both of those bands have those same kind of you know, dynamic shifts between things that are dense and heavy and things that are melodic and pretty. And it just seemed like he would absolutely know how to do that well, and he did an unbelievable job. I'm not kidding. He mastered our record in 1 day.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
As you mentioned, Jack Shirley is probably best known for his work with Def Heaven. He's worked with a few bands that have been on this podcast before, like Gracian and Succumb.
For sure.
And this is the first time that you worked with Jack, right?
Yes, yeah. Previously, we had worked with Brad Boatwright, who I also have to say is a fantastic mastering engineer.
Yeah. So as we're having this conversation, the album is has been released quite recently. What are your plans for the future? I know that you guys just finished up a short tour.
Yeah, we did a short run with a band from New Jersey called Cowardice, who are a really fantastic group of people and are super heavy, and everybody should check them out. But yeah, you know, we are playing a record release show locally at the end of this week. And then our plans for the summer are just to kind of take it easy. And we have some songs that we're working on right now, and I think we're looking to kind of finish them up before we contemplate any more live shows. But we're hoping to do, you know, a little bit of playing out here and there as time permits for us. We all have pretty busy jobs and schedules, so it can be difficult for us to get out into the world in a live setting. But you know, it seems like the response to the record has been really good, and it was very fun to play the songs live for people. So I hope we do more of that.
And do you want to give everyone listening to this podcast an inkling of what the songs that you're working on will sound like?
Yeah, so I mean, from the perspective of what the mood of them are, it's going to be definitely kind of a continuation of the vibe of the songs on the Pornography of Ruin. But we are looking to kind of explore a little more of that ambient territory. And so we are going to probably have a little bit more material that kind of leans towards the sound of songs like The Sound of Kindness in the Voice, or I Am Without Heaven and a Law Unto Myself, or you know, that the big middle track by This Are You Truly Known. So yeah, we had a great time kind of incorporating some of the more atmospheric elements, the kind of washed out guitar, the synth tones. Our drummer Mark really made a lot of things happen on this record. He played the synth on The Sound of Kindness in the Voice, and I really loved his ideas for that song as well. And I'm hoping that we can continue to make songs like that interspersed with kind of the heavier material that we've always played.
So the Pornography of Ruin is the name of the third Hush album, and it's out now. Charles, how can people order the album? What's the best way to get it?
The best way to get it currently would be through our Bandcamp, which is just hushdoom.bandcamp.com. And you can order it on CD or just grab it up digitally. The digital version is $5, so it's pretty accessible to people out there. Uh, Previously, we had actually given all of our music away for free always, but it cost us a little bit of money to get the studio thing up and running, and we put a lot into the record. So this one we had to charge something for.
And I should mention that through your Bandcamp page, the previous releases are available as name your price downloads. So if people want to chip in a few bucks for those, they can do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And of course, it's cool with us if people just download them for free. I just want people to hear the music.
And do you want to say anything about the cassette version that Sludge Lord is putting out?
Oh yeah, I would love to say something about it because I think it looks fantastic. I'm a little biased because I did the design for it, but it was also like it was a crazy process. I had never done such a complicated tape layout before, and I think it came out really cool looking. It sort of exceeded my expectations. And there's a turquoise version and a vintage gold version that's kind of like a metallic gold, and I think they both look really cool. So if people are into cassettes, yeah, go grab one of them up. They look really awesome.
And if people want to follow Hush online, what's the best way to do that?
We're on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and all of those are just at Hush Doom, all one word. And we're probably most active on Instagram at this point, but follow us anywhere. And if you want to send us a message or anything, we'll respond to you.
Very cool. Is there anything else you want to say?
I just would like to say thank you very much for your interest in the record and for the questions. They were really thoughtful and great. And I appreciated the conversation quite a bit. And I hope that people go out and check out our record and find something in it that they can connect to emotionally and musically. That's why we make the music that we do.
Very cool. Thank you, Charles.
Cool. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful experience.